This is Cale Clarke with the Faith Explained Institute, thefaithexplained.com, coming to you once again with a little commentary on the daily readings from Mass today. And today I'm going to talk about the first reading, the Old Testament reading. And sometimes people call it the Hebrew Scriptures, and maybe that's better because it's not old news, right? People always want to get to the new stuff. But God speaks to us just as powerfully through the books of the Hebrew Scriptures, the Old Testament. And the first reading today comes to us from one of my very favorites, the book of Daniel, Daniel chapter 3. And of course, this is the famous account of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. The three Russian hockey players is what my friends like to call them. Or maybe we could just call them Rack, Shack, and Benny from VeggieTales, if you've ever seen that Christian kids show. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were actually from Israel, from the Holy Land, and they had been carried away along with Daniel into captivity, into Babylon. And of course, in Daniel chapter 3, I'm not going to read you the whole chapter, but you can look at it yourself. We see the famous account of how Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were thrown into a blazing, fiery furnace. Why? For refusing to commit the sin of idolatry, for refusing to bow down to a golden statue of the king himself, King Nebuchadnezzar. And you know what? We have a lot in common with those guys, especially with this whole COVID crisis that's raging all around us. These men were removed from their religious milieu, from what they were used to, the ways that they worship God all the time. We kind of feel that way too, because we're sort of in confinement in our homes. We're watching Mass online. We're not allowed to go into our temples, our houses of worship. They're locked because we don't want people to get sick and possibly die from the coronavirus. We're separated from our brothers and sisters in the faith in so many ways, except for through FaceTime or something like that, a video chat. And so we have to be faithful to our God, even in the midst of this new situation, like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were. And one of the interesting things about our situation is that, being separated from what we're used to forces us to confront the idols in our own lives, and we all have them. We're all tempted to this sin of not putting God first. What's an idol? It's basically anything in the created order that is not God. It could be a person, it could be a thing, it could be gold, like the gold of the statue, money, riches. It could be sports, and I hate to say that one kind of hits me, right where it hurts. I'm a big sports fan, but let's face it, the Holy Grail is not the Stanley Cup. It's the chalice filled with the blood of Christ. The Super Bowl is really the golden ciborium filled with the sacred hosts. And we're separated from those things right now. We don't have access to the sacraments right now in most cases, but we do have to purify ourselves. And just like the flames in that fiery furnace burned white hot, we have to allow our situation, the trials we're going through, to burn off the dross in our lives, to purify us so that we can be refined servants of God. And what happened to these guys in the end? Well, the scriptures tell us. They were not harmed in the fire. In fact, Nebuchadnezzar rose in haste, it tells us, and asked his nobles, "Did we not see 3 men bound into the fire?" "Assuredly, O king," they answered. "But," he replied, "I see 4 men, unfettered and unhurt, walking in the fire, and the 4th looks like a son of God." Nebuchadnezzar exclaimed, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent his angel to deliver the servants who trusted in him. They disobeyed the royal command and yielded their bodies rather than serve or worship any god except their own God." There's been a lot of scholarly conjecture about who that 4th person was in the fiery flames, one that was like a son of God. Some people think it was a pre-incarnate appearance of Christ. I'm not so sure about that. A lot of other commentators, and I'm inclined to agree, think it was an angel, even as King Nebuchadnezzar said. But either way, we know that God was with them in the fire. And God is with us in our fiery trial that we're going through right now too. And may we live our lives in such a way that our neighbors, our friends around us who maybe don't believe in our God, can say like Nebuchadnezzar did, these guys are faithful to the God they believe in, and maybe it will cause them too to give glory to the one true and living God. See you next time. I'm Cale Clarke with the Faith Explained Institute.